We're about to mulch the entire garden with triple shredded hardwood mulch. I don't know what it would be called in your area, but it's the bark from a hardwood tree that's been shredded, and we buy that in bulk. And most of the beds, the shrubs, the older perennials, trees, you know, that's what we mulch with out here. We're mulching a little later than we normally do. Normally we would do this back in beginning of March, but my mulch was just kind of thick and I really wanted it to break down a little more. But now we're suffering a little bit from that decision. It has broken down more and it's ready for mulch, but that period of time between March 1st and now June 1st as we're filming this, there's a lot of weeds out here. More weeds than we've had in the last few years. Not a lot, but more than we've had in the last few years. So I'm trying to get all that under control. We have multiple different types of mulches out here. I have wood chips in the paths. We initially started the beds with wood chips. So we, allowed that material to break down a little while and then we planted into that. But we continue to use wood chips for the paths. I like the light color of it, contrasting with the darker color of the hardwood mulch that's in the beds. But then I use a third mulch, and it's pine bark. I know some people in the country can't get pine bark, but if you can find bark from a pine tree, this is, sometimes it's called pine bark fines, sometimes it's called just pine bark mulch. At Lowe's it's just called pine bark mulch, and then they have mini nuggets and nuggets, which are larger pieces. The pine bark mulch isn't screened as well as I probably would like it overall, because there are pieces in there that I would describe as mini nuggets and nuggets, right? In with the thin, with the fine pine bark. That's really what I'm after. If I could have that, all that, but for some reason they don't have it screened quite as well, but that's okay. It works just fine. I'm using this in our annual beds because I need, we planted the annuals in compost, and that's basically the equivalent of just kind of bare soil and it's the perfect condition for any seed that blows in there or lands there to germinate, because it's got that perfect moist, base that you would, almost like I'm starting seed in the house in trays, but in the bed. So I don't want to end up with weediness in our annual borders. And so I'm taking this bark material and I'm mulching the annuals with it, because it will hold in some moisture, but it breathes pretty well, and it won't keep them too wet. Okay, I'm trying to avoid trying to keep them too wet. I'm trying to avoid ending up with slugs in it, snails in it, those kinds of things that could be destructive to the annuals as well. But I find this pine bark is just kind of neutral, right? It goes in the bed. It holds a little bit of moisture, so it's porous. It's the outside of a pine tree, and this material is porous. It's got a little air in it. Okay, so air is good, and also those little holes can also hold some water. So, when we're irrigating, it doesn't hold a lot of water, but it will hold some moisture that will be helpful to the plants. And then, of course, it's a weed block. That's one of the main things I'm using it for. This bark doesn't work well if you have a slope. It's not great Pine bark's not great for erosion control. They're probably better mulches overall for erosion control. The other thing I'll use it for is capping off some of our containers. So this is a good material for keeping some moisture in the containers, keeping weeds from germinating in my containers, but not keeping it crazy wet in the containers. So I'll just put a very thin coat of this pine bark around this Lamandra, this Miner's Gold Lamandra. This is not a lot of material. I'm half an inch of material. I'm just trying to get that soil covered. And again, that will help me maintain a little bit of more consistent moisture in the container. This thing doesn't actually like all that much water. And then prevent weeds from germinating here without really, this is obviously organic material and it does have nutrients in it, but it takes years for this stuff to break down. One of the main reasons this material is used in the finer ground up part is used for growing shrubs and trees is because it doesn't break down all that quickly. So you can irrigate it, you can fertilize in it, you can irrigate it, and it doesn't shrink. So if I fill a 3-gallon container and I plant this boxwood in it while it's still very small, and I grow it out for 12 months or 18 months, the bark doesn't shrink in that amount of time. Any other kind of organic material that you had in that container would shrink down in time. So it stays porous, it holds a little bit of water, it's lighter than anything else. So, if you're growing container plants in it, they're gonna be, they're not gonna weigh, 100 pounds each, they're gonna weigh 20 pounds each. And again, it drains well. It will only hold a certain amount of water before it releases the rest. It won't just keep holding on to water like peat moss or something like that. But again, I'll just use it in places where I'm not particularly trying to add, a big thick layer of anything, but I'm just trying to have a little bit of moisture retention, a few less weeds than I'd have in that spot during the winter time. And it's gonna offer some cooling, especially to these containers, right? Because these, these containers are out here getting absolutely hammered by the sun and the roots are getting hot on them. So it's gonna keep them slightly cooler than it would otherwise. But I'll go around to each container and do that. Out in the front garden, those annuals are up big enough now that I was able just to kind of dump the mulch across the top of them without really hurting them. And then I just take my hands and spread it out in there. And then I'll take a water hose and wash it off the top so they'll be nice and clean. Out here along this edge, I just dumped it on the patio, and I'll just go through here by hand and, just kind of go around here without hurting anything. What I really love is the differentiation in color in the garden. So that differentiation in color and texture, can be done with the shapes of leaves, the colors of foliage, and also can be done with mulch. This is the lighter color path. I'll have a much darker hardwood mulch strip right here. And then I'll have this kind of brown, chocolate brown color from this bark around these annuals. So that's the reason, another reason I'm using it is just because it's decorative. back some.
Yeah.
I really quit talking about pine bark as much because there's just a lot of the country that doesn't have pine trees, where this is, this is the byproduct from the lumber industry. When they take a pine tree down, the bark of the tree, and the beauty of this material, again, it's like corks. And when I put up one of the most popular, the million view video that I have on the channel is clay planting video, and I included this because it's great for amending clay soils when you're planting shrubs. And it's the thing that the shrub's already grown in anyway. When you take the pod out of the container, you're seeing a bark, cork type bark like this, and it's great for that. But I quit kind of talking about it as much just because, again, there's a good portion of the country that couldn't find it. But if you can, there's a lot of different uses for this material in the garden. Again, I think if you have a sloped lot, you're going to find yourself raking this stuff back into beds a lot. It's going to be crossing sidewalks and all those kinds of things. We have a pretty reasonably flat lot here to use it on. But in preparation for using it in these containers and in these annual beds, make sure all the weeds are pulled. And then this is just the perfect cap to hopefully prevent some of those weeds the rest of the season without really changing the environment that they're being grown in. You know what I mean? If I put a 2-inch cap of hardwood mulch that mats down really tight on top of it, it probably will end up at times holding too much water. The other thing about this material is the top of it tends to be dry. So if I'm adding, let's say I'm adding an inch to this container or that bed over there or whatever, the top little bit that's exposed to the sunlight stays super, super dry and takes away an environment where weeds could germinate. Okay, so that you'll see that more and more with plants that you're buying. They may have rice hulls on top or peanut hulls or all kinds of materials people are looking to use on the top of containers now. Well, the idea is if you can keep the top half-inch of soil really dry, there's not an environment for weed seeds to germinate. So that's part of this as well. But again, if you can get your hands on some pine bark, I think it's the best thing to use to mulch your vegetable garden, any annual beds, containers, any of those kinds of things. If you're growing plants, if you're rooting a few plants and you're looking to pot them up from a small container into a slightly larger container, this material is good to mix into whatever your mix is to make sure that it drains well as you grow the plants a little larger before you plant them into the ground. But that's one of the projects we're doing, getting ready for our bigger mulching project, which is coming later this week. And I think when people are here for the open garden, you'll really appreciate the fact that the color, a lot of the color that we have and texture and everything is obviously done with plants. I think you can see that in the background, all sorts of textures, colors, flower colors, all those kinds of things. There's a second thing of color out here, which is literally done by painting the ground in different mulches. That really, it stands out and it's super striking with a little bit of detail that we'll add to this over the next few days. So thank you guys for following along with it.